Will you reverse a history of neglect? Another chance now on BBC Two to save Britain's endangered buildings. Griff Rhys Jones is at the Tower of London.
Hello, welcome to Restoration as we enter the fourth week of our campaign to save Britain's endangered buildings. Now, so far we've seen over 20 of our candidates, including on Friday's programme 3 deserving locations in the Scottish Highlands and Islands. So, how did they fare when it came to your voting? Did you vote for Burra Croft, one of only 2 original thatched crofters' cottages remaining on the Shetland Islands? Or how about that no expense spared symbol of Edwardian excess, Kinloch Castle? Or did you vote for the Bavarian-style edifice Banchory Sanatorium, where sufferers from TB were hospitalised? Well, the winner is here in the envelope as usual. I don't know the result, but what I'm told about the way people voted is interesting. We offered 3 very diverse types of buildings last week, perhaps the most varied of the series so far. Yet the voting was very well spread between the 3, showing perhaps that all had wide appeal. But there had to be one winner. And the building that'll go through to the final on September the 14th is Kinloch Castle. A late 19th century folly on the remote island of Rhum, Kinloch Castle has what is said to be the best preserved Edwardian interior of a grand house remaining in Britain today. If it goes on to win the final, it'll be restored to allow visits and offer accommodation to nature conservation groups and holidaymakers, as well as being a venue for community gatherings. Congratulations to Kinloch Castle. Now, if you feel moved to lend your aid to the Croft at Burra or the Sanatorium at Banchory, you can find out how to contact the support groups via our website, and it's really heartening to hear how other buildings that haven't made it to the final are finding new supporters as a result of appearing on the programme. I hear that something like 4,500 people have contacted Britannia Music Hall in Glasgow since we visited, including some who knew it in its heyday. But let's move on now. We've got 3 more buildings in need of help in another region of the country. Well, today we're going to cover a big area, a very big area, full of interesting buildings. And I've come right to the far north of this area to look at something, well, it's not exactly a building, it's more a sort of structure, a functional monument. It's a wall. But it's no ordinary wall. It's Hadrian's Wall, we're in the northeast of England. Built in 122 AD and named after their emperor, this 73-mile stretch of stone battlements marked the northernmost edge of the Roman Empire. Throughout its history, it's been a symbol of war and conflict. And that's the theme of our programme tonight. Neighbours. Everybody loves good neighbours. But for the next 1,300 years, this was the kingdom of argy-bargy. It was disputed border territory. It's hardly surprising, then, that we might expect to find buildings here which are defensive, big, rugged, with little battlements on top of them. And then we'll be travelling south, to Yorkshire. The northeast has the biggest ratio of historic buildings at risk in the United Kingdom. And we've tracked down 3 contenders in need of restoration. We have a Gothic castle with a bloody secret, a heartwarming story of wartime spirit at a makeshift camp, and a battle of wills that's left a garden lost in time. Well, now it's time to go and look at our first contender, and part of it was built as a defence against northern invasion. But there's a bit more to it than that. We're heading to the outskirts of Gateshead, where, nestling amid the surrounding woodland, is Ravensworth Castle, the ancestral home of the Liddell family. By the turn of the 19th century, Thomas Henry Liddell, the 6th Lord Ravensworth, had become fabulously wealthy, thanks to a rich supply of coal. He owned every one of the local collieries, and to show off his elevated status, he wanted a trophy house. So, he sent for a trophy designer, royal architect John Nash. Mr. Nash somewhat reluctantly set off on a 4-day journey to the cold, damp north. He could be forgiven for not wanting to leave Regency London. After all, he built most of it. But he was also a businessman, and he knew that where there was coal, there was gold. Liddell commissioned him to think big, and Nash did not disappoint. In fact, he designed the biggest, most ostentatious building in the entire northeast of England. If Nash and Liddell could see what's become of their grand collaboration, they'd be shocked. But tonight, Ravensworth Castle is our first candidate for restoration.
I love it when they just dump us in the middle of nowhere, don't you?
Marvellous, picturesque ruin in the distance.
So we're in somebody's garden, I guess.
Fountain in the middle.
Yep.
Ravensworth is a forgotten treasure. Most local people have never even heard of it. And for the last 50 years, it's been visited only by trespassers and vandals. But can such ruined buildings ever be restored? That's what our ruin detectives surveyor Marianne Sir and architect Ptolemy Dean are here to find out. With no prior knowledge of the place, can they draw out its secrets and draw in your votes?
It's an amazingly austere sort of tower, isn't it? There's no sort of Gothic frilliness about this building. It's just very simple.
What an extraordinary place to
The way this stone's weathering there, it's just sort of... Nature is reclaiming the whole site, isn't it? Eroding the stone and taking over with this ivy.
Dry rot, taking of the lead. I mean, the loss of country houses is so awful. I mean, the numbers that were just swept away. It's incredible to see a house in such a state of complete decay.
Even in its current state, Ravensworth is one of the most important structures in the area, which is partly down to its architect, the celebrated John Nash. The Prince Regent commissioned him to design Regent Street and Regent's Park in London, and of course a little something for the weekend, the Brighton Pavilion. Nash also embraced the 19th century Gothic revival, designing grand country houses with castle-style turrets and battlements, located in picturesque landscapes. Ravensworth made a bold statement about the Liddells' wealth and social status. Famous house guests included the author Sir Walter Scott and the Duke of Wellington. By the 1930s, the castle grounds were home to a series of military tattoos, but the castle itself was home to no one. It was already abandoned and fading fast. But that didn't stop two little girls growing up on the surrounding estate from picturing the place in all its former splendour.
To see this castle just 10 minutes away from where you lived was really, quite special. And we would climb up and peep through the shutters, and you could just make out the minstrel's gallery and the double staircase. You just imagined all sorts of things happening there.
I lived in the lodge. My father was a woodcutter and a sort of gamekeeper, so I had the whole woods to wander. I used to think I was like a Little Red Riding Hood.
It's not an option to rebuild the castle itself. It's just too impractical and expensive. Instead, the restoration scheme is focused on a part of the site with much older origins.
There's nothing that makes me happier than exploring country house ruins. And look what's coming round the corner here.
Oh, wow!
Look, a whole township of ruin. What an amazing thing that is. A complete castle stable yard. Come on, let's go in.
This is a real medieval tower.
Do you think it's real or re-erected?
I think it's real. Oh, look at this! It's fantastic, Ptolemy.
That's got to be, that has genuinely got to be old, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You look how worn the stone is.
They're right. The twin medieval towers were built in the 12th century and are themselves scheduled ancient monuments.
the difference between a building like that, a genuine medieval building, and our sanitised Victorian Gothic, where everything had to be symmetrical. But original Gothic was not symmetrical, was it? I mean, they punched a window opening where a window opening needed to be. And you would have had people coming out that little doorway there and patrolling the curtain wall to defend the castle.
Northumberland, County Durham, very dangerous place, nasty Scottish attackers to the north, all sorts of troublesome
Well, of course, in late medieval times, there was an awful lot of trouble between... Are we on the main road between Scotland
A1,
and England?
absolutely,
Yeah.
it's just in that valley down below.
So
A1,
all those
Edinburgh,
problems that were occurring between Scotland and England. It's a real hotspot, isn't it, for trouble?
People have been living at Ravensworth for at least 800 years. When John Nash came in 1804, there was already a Georgian house here, the old Liddell family home, which Nash demolished to make way for his new castle. But he decided to keep the medieval towers and incorporated them into his design for the stable yard, identifiable by its clock tower. It's all in such a state now that it's difficult to tell Nash's work from the genuinely medieval. But to the expert eye, there's no mistaking the original.
This is such a beautiful room. This, for me, is everything that is special about old buildings. There is no superfluous decoration. Every single feature in this room that is beautiful is there for a function, for a reason. These wonderful pointed arches either side of the fireplace are there to support the massive masonry that's sitting above. This is the ultimate experience for me, finding a little building like this that hasn't been messed around. It's just here pretty much as it would have appeared in the 14th or maybe it's even the 13th century. Great testimony to medieval building techniques.
Marianne and Ptolemy have now reached the focal point of the restoration plans. In its heyday, this was the busiest part of the estate, the 19th century stable yard.
I loved the stable block because I was very keen on horses. The horses must have recently gone, but the coaches were still in place. And I remember once getting into one of these coaches,
Yes.
and, well, I was Cinderella. It was absolutely wonderful, and I had a lovely time till I realised you couldn't open it from the inside.
So, can Ravensworth stable yard be brought back to life?
I think we're talking more than restoration, we're talking about largely reconstruction, aren't we? Because this has just gone beyond the point of restoration now. They're going to have to build up complete gabled walls, completely new roof structures, and I would imagine a lot of this stonework would have to be rebuilt entirely now. But all the evidence is there to be able to reconstruct it in a fairly accurate way.
What brought about the ruin of such a grand estate? Well, it was coal which built it, and ironically, coal which destroyed it. Because the castle was built directly on top of one of Lord Ravensworth's coal mines, and the underground workings eventually caused subsidence. Throw in massive debts from death duties, and you've got two very good reasons to move out. Which the Liddells did in the 1920s. The ensuing decline was as rapid as it was irreversible.
Something should be done. It's dreadful the way there's just these poor, desolate bricks with such beautiful stone. I could be really, really heartbroken, is the expression.
Finally, in 1953, the castle was demolished altogether. But by some strange stroke of luck, the demolition stopped short of the stable yard and the twin medieval towers, which is extremely fortunate for us. But what do Marianne and Ptolemy make of this complicated set of ruins?
I think without a doubt the most important thing on this site are the two medieval towers. I mean, they were around in the days of Braveheart, William Wallace himself. They're so ancient, they're so special to have survived all those centuries, all the battles between the Scottish and the English, and they would have been right at the heart of that. Fantastically important buildings. But I think it's really interesting how the estate has developed, using those as the sort of central influence. And I think it's the layering that actually makes any site like this interesting.
There's a real opportunity here to make a special effort to actually bring these buildings back to economic use. They are perfectly reconstructible if it's economically viable. And it looks like, in this case, it is going to be economically viable and also socially desirable, given we've got this enormous population just across the valley from us.
So what exactly do they plan to do here? Well, it's immediately obvious that some changes have already been made.
Since Marianne and Ptolemy came here, in fact, they've cleared away quite a lot of the weeds and the shrubbery, and they've revealed something, well, I thought, I suppose, when I was coming here, that I was going to see something rather fanciful and ornate. But in fact, it's very simple, very straightforward. It's beautifully done. It's a real, solid, working building.
Clearing away the undergrowth has also confirmed that the site is ripe for restoration. The plan is to turn the stable yard into the headquarters of the Great North Forest, a government body which aims to give the public access to woodland and countryside across the northeast of England.
So let's take us through what it is that you intend to do with this site. Just reassure us, you're not intending to rebuild the entire house, are you?
Absolutely not. No, our aim is to conserve what we've got, make good use of it, and get the public in here.
OK, but somebody might say you've got two original lovely medieval towers which are pretty hot stuff, and these are just fake ones over here, aren't they? All this stuff over here, that's just something that's been put up.
The rest of the site is needed to be able to look after these. They're fascinating, but you can't really use them for anything. So how do we look after them? They're going to need money in the future for upkeep. So the idea is to use the whole of the site to generate what money and resources are needed and the care to keep the whole thing buzzing. And the people that we've identified who we're working with are the Great North Forest, which is one of the nation's community forests. Their role here would be to either use it as a base or to bring businesses in here that have some connection with where they are. And what this could provide is an opportunity for people to work within forestry and to do craft courses and to learn the skills. What does forestry mean? It's not just about trees, but it's about all of the processes, about management of forestry.
So people will actually be able to come here and use this building, not just see it.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
So it's not just the visitor attraction, it's this whole idea of getting people into the community forest and understanding what that's all about.
All right. So what sort of money are you talking about here?
We are talking about a lot of money. Our calculations are this is going to take us a whisker over £3 million.
Right. What would you say was the unique thing that should prompt them to vote for this building as opposed to any other building?
I think what the viewers are buying into here is this secret garden, the fact that you're coming into a site which has all of the history behind it, but it's actually something that is going to really have a role. And as you can see, in terms of being able to come in and enjoy the quality of what's here, we're bringing something back from the very brink. We've only probably got a couple of years left before this will be too far gone. And to me, that's what the restoration is about, making the vision into reality, and that's what I really believe can happen here.
So, £3 million will turn the stable yard into a base for the Great North Forest, providing community access to the countryside and running educational courses in forestry management. Will that be enough to win your vote?
Now, if you want to save Ravensworth, this is what you do.
Vote for the restoration of Ravensworth by dialling 0901 077 7777. The building that gets the most votes tonight will go forward to our final, where one building will pick up its restoration money. 0901 077 7777.
If you're wondering exactly where Ravensworth is, well, this might help. Well, of course, the mines that went right under the house and knocked it down, they've all gone. But in their place has arisen a great winged creature. This is Anthony Gormley's magnificent Angel of the North, and it looks as if it's about to float off into the air, doesn't it? In fact, its foundations go 300 feet down into Lord Ravensworth's mine. It's a fitting monument, I think, to the people who actually paid for the big house. The miners.
Coming up, the second building you can vote to save tonight. A place where prisoners were held in the northeast of England within living memory. Let's Let's travel there, though, in the footsteps of a set of prisoners brought here 350 years earlier. Our journey begins in July 1650. Just across the border, on the plains of Dunbar, the English army, led by Oliver Cromwell, had won a great victory over the Scots. 10,000 Scottish soldiers were taken prisoner.
Now, this posed a little bit of a dilemma for old Ironsides. What was he supposed to do with the largest number of prisoners ever taken up to that time in battle? Kill them. That's what he might have been expected to do by the standards of the time. But in fact, Cromwell, we shouldn't forget, was part of a new order of the common man. And Parliament itself had laid down standards for the treatment of prisoners of war. It wasn't the Geneva Convention, but for what Cromwell called his poor wretches, it was a start.
But Cromwell now had to find somewhere big enough to keep them. So the wounded and the dying were released, and the rest, some 5,000, were marched south. They covered a punishing 30 miles on the first day, eventually arriving in Berwick-on-Tweed. For centuries, Scotland and England had fought over Berwick. Its town walls were repeatedly adapted to meet the changing fashions of war.
All this rage for military improvement only came to an end finally in the 17th century, when the English and the Scottish resolved their differences and became the very dear friends that they are today.
The Scottish prisoners were marched on to the 12th century Alnwick Castle.
Beautiful, isn't it? But this is architecture as functional as a pitchfork. It wasn't designed as a picturesque country house. It was designed as a fighting machine.
Through the centuries, Alnwick has been extended and remodelled into the impressive stately home it is today.
When the Scottish prisoners came here, though, and they stayed for one night in this courtyard, this place was an unused, unloved, out-of-date military outpost.
For Cromwell's prisoners, conditions had now become so appalling that many had died of starvation, disease and exhaustion. After another 7 days on the road, a mere 3,000 survivors were counted into Durham, where their journey finally ended.
Durham Castle. It was originally built as a symbol of the Norman conquest, a mighty redoubt. It's a vicarage. Well, at least it's a bishop's palace, built at a time when you wouldn't want to meet a bishop on a dark night if you were up to no good, because the king had originally enjoined his medieval bishops to keep order in this region. This was their powerhouse, and Cromwell's generals at last found a place big enough to keep all their prisoners. Not here, just next door over there, in Durham Cathedral. Why was a medieval cathedral so huge?
For all sorts of reasons. One was they wanted to show the power of God. The Normans wanted to show the power of the Normans. So it was a political statement as well as to the power of God. But more importantly, it was built as a place of pilgrimage, and they knew they would have literally hundreds and hundreds of pilgrims coming.
But by the time Cromwell had decided to use this as a prison, it had already lost some of its status as a cathedral, hadn't it?
In the Civil War, it was treated extremely badly. When the Scots took Durham, they used this as a barracks. When Cromwell came to Durham, he put his horses in, used it as a stable, and then, of course, the Scottish prisoners came.
This would have been a very cold building in the autumn of that year, and these weren't enlightened times. There was malnutrition, there was sickness. Of the 5,000 Scottish prisoners who set off on that march, 3,500 died on the march or here, imprisoned in Durham Cathedral. That's more than were killed in the original battle 3 months before on the plains of Dunbar.
It's true to say that the obvious horrors of this story certainly helped to change attitudes in the future. 300 years later, more prisoners come to County Durham, in much greater numbers. It's a very different war, but it's a similar dilemma. And it brings us to the second building that you may want to vote for tonight. D-Day and the Normandy landings of June 1944. The tide of war has finally turned, and Allied troops are pushing through Europe.
The Huns had evidently been ordered, as usual, to fight to the death. Surrender was not even to be considered. But the Hun usually changes his mind when he finds himself being outfought by better men.
For the first time, large numbers of prisoners were being taken, and the authorities realised we had nowhere to put them. Most were ordinary foot soldiers and classed as low risk. But we still had to find accommodation quickly and cheaply. The second building you can vote to save was part of that solution. The most modern restoration candidate of the entire series might not look much at first, but it has recently been declared a scheduled ancient monument. Marianne and Ptolemy's mission is to find out why.
Well, Ptolemy, I feel like we're in a scene from Escape from Colditz or something, don't you?
Except you're going into it. Extraordinary.
It's like nothing I've ever seen before. I mean, these are buildings that have been put up in a hurry, aren't they?
It does look like some kind of prison camp of some sort, doesn't it? It's like being in Eastern Europe, walking through here, these pine trees and these arid... Look at
God,
that.
Look at it.
Have you ever seen such a bleak place? It's definitely World War II, isn't it?
Prefab is post-World War I, isn't it? I think that's for sure. Prisoner of war camp, maybe?
There were about 100 purpose-built prisoner of war camps in Britain in World War II. Today, just 4 remain intact, of which Harperley is by far the most complete. But the real fascination here is not so much the buildings as the memories they hold.
Well, these are hardly the most sophisticated pieces of architecture that we've seen, are they, Marianne?
But it's incredibly simple, isn't it? The whole construction method. I mean, they built a brick base, then they filled it all with concrete for a floor, stuck these concrete posts, embedded them into the concrete, and then these posts have got a slot down the middle, so that they could actually just drop down these concrete panels. They just drop them into position. And I think this bitumen line must have been where they probably smeared some bitumen along there, so when they dropped them down, they sealed the cracks. Well, it was probably only designed to last for the duration of the war, wasn't it? 2 or 3 years at the most, maybe.
And you see it's rather crude, because this concrete's got lots of air bubbles in it. I mean, they're literally just throwing it into moulds, you know, lots of air bubbles, no quality to this at all.
Well, this is going to be the major problem with repairing these buildings, is that these posts are all reinforced concrete, reinforced with these steel bars. And as soon as the air gets to them and the water gets to them, they start to corrode. And as they corrode, they expand and blow off the face of the concrete.
There are 55 huts in all, which housed around 1,500 German and Italian prisoners. Only a handful of those former inmates survive, but we've tracked down a few and brought them back to share their recollections.
This is hut number 5. At that time there were 40 people living in here. There were 20 booms.
I left Hamburg airport yesterday. From that minute till this very moment, it's a very, very great impression that I forgot about 55 years. I think I'm about 21 years old and I feel like that and I'm fit.
Although they found conditions at Harperley Spartan, it was an improvement on the transit camps they had previously been used to.
I was 6 months in Germany in a prisoner of war camp, and we were never outside the camp. And when we came here, the next day we were allowed to go outside the barbed wire to do some work on the farms and so. For me, that was the happiest day of my life.
The prisoners provided a valuable workforce on farms and building sites. They were given leisure time outside the camp and were welcomed into the local community. Morale was good. The men took pride in their new home. And incredibly, many of the personal touches which made Harperley so special still survive.
Oh, look, this building's different. What is this?
You know what this is? This is the camp theatre.
Is this the band?
That's the band pit. And here's the stage. It's got raked seating. In the 1930s curvaceous detail.
Look at this. This is really lovely, isn't it, the way they've done that?
The camp had its own theatre group and orchestra, led by professional composer Helmut Ince. He wrote musicals for the theatre group to perform for the local community.
I love seeing a sort of banal building type turn into something joyous through the application of paint, Hessian sacking, and a bit of,
sheer determination.
Exactly. It's that splendid wartime spirit, really, isn't it?
They even made their own costumes, props and sets.
Helmut Ince is now 86. He's still alive, but in a wheelchair. And he was the composer and writer of an operetta.
Ah, yes.
We played here Melody of Love. And Bubi Ulemann, he's not alive anymore, was our Lilo. He was so nice to look at.
Oh, good heavens above, look at this.
Wow.
How touching this is. It becomes more and more enchanting, doesn't it?
Look at the curtains, Ptolemy. Aren't these fantastic?
It's Hansel and Gretel in hardboard. Such fun. I love it.
There's something incredibly poignant about coming into a building like this, isn't there? To have done this, to have lifted their spirits in this way, it makes it very human, doesn't it? It's suddenly gone for me from being a very unhappy place, with that sort of Colditz feeling when we came in, to being really quite a joyful place. You can actually...
I've actually had fun
hear
here.
people laughing if you listen hard enough.
We arranged a final surprise for our returning POWs with the help of Durham University Orchestra. Melody of Love, the operetta written by former prisoner Helmut Ince, is about to be struck up for the first time in over 50 years.
I have to confess, I've never felt particularly strongly about protecting 20th century buildings. Their components always have that feeling of having just been rolled off a production line. I think today, I must admit, I've actually had my preconceptions challenged. The sheer resourcefulness of the prisoners of war who lived here, who turned the most unspecial building into something that was really quite extraordinary and unique.
When you put these precast concrete huts next to, say, a beautifully carved medieval church, artistically speaking, the two are not comparable. This is more of a site not about architecture so much, it's about memory and history of a time when actually people of your age and my age had their lives destroyed. To me, it's as much part of our history and our heritage as that beautiful medieval church.
The memories of these men are integral to Harperley's future. Sadly, since we made this film, Ben Lugering has died, so too has Helmut Ince, the composer of Melody of Love. It proves that if we want to save this place, we've got to move quickly. Unlike most historic buildings, Harperley wasn't discovered by heritage experts, but by local farmers. James and Lisa MacLeod. Used for agricultural storage since the Second World War, they thought they were buying a bunch of farm sheds. Since they've discovered what it was, they've been working hard to preserve it. But when they first came here, their plans were a little less ambitious.
Our first intention was to fill them full of hens. But it seems a bit daft now, but like agricultural storage with us having the farm.
I mean, when you started doing this, what did you think you were getting involved in? Can you remember when you started?
It was just something to do on a weekend, really, wasn't it? But it's all sort of snowballed from then, and different people have got involved, and we've travelled to places we never thought we would. We've been to Germany to meet the ex-prisoners, and now it does take over our lives, really.
When people come here to visit the centre, I mean, what are they going to see? They're going to see watchtowers and barriers going up?
Well, the main things are the theatre. We want to restore that. Going off the old photographs we have. There's the medical centre. We want to show what medical facilities they had then. And then the rest of the huts we want to do different themes that were connected with the prisoners of war, i.e. the land girls, maybe the home guard, how they used to work on the farms.
What the local community was like, what was going on, and how the prisoners were involved with the local community.
So how much is it going to cost?
To stabilise each building, with the professional advice, we're thinking about 20,000 per building.
And so, there with the buildings in town, what sort of sum are you looking for altogether then?
To stabilise it, we're looking somewhere for £1 million or thereabouts.
Isn't it going to be an enormous job to restore them? Wouldn't it be better to sort of, some way, to sort of start again with some new buildings?
We think the place has got a certain atmosphere. You know, when you walk around it, you can imagine all the people that were here. They could have just left a few months ago. I don't think you could recreate it, really.
It's going to cost £1 million to make these buildings safe, and probably another $1 million to turn the whole place into a living museum. That's £2 million for the whole restoration to preserve Britain's most intact World War II prisoner of war camp. If you want to help Harperley, this is how you can vote. Dial the Restoration Vote line on 0901 077 7777 and nominate Harperley as your favourite building. That's 0901 077 7777. When James and Lisa went pushing through those bushes, they were looking for someone to put their chickens, and they ended up with, well, a scheduled monument on their hands. They certainly need some help. But let's look at a project now that doesn't need any help from us. It was a business-like undertaking, and it certainly shows that restoration can pay, but only under specific conditions. Dean Clough Mills in Halifax shows that, like much else in life, size matters. The mill was established in 1803 by a local family called the Crossleys, and flourished through their initiative and the graft of its workers. By the early 20th century, it had become the biggest carpet-making factory in the world. They're glorious, stone-built workhorses of the Industrial Revolution. I love the way that the mills on site are just called Mill A, Mill B, Mill C, all the way up to Mill H. There's 2/3 of a mile of them. In 1982, with Britain in the throes of an economic recession, the mill closed. All too often, that's a death sentence for industrial buildings like this. Instead, another local family with big ideas stepped in. You came here and bought the buildings almost as soon as the carpet factory moved out, didn't you? Was that a help?
For the majority of the buildings, they kept them in good condition, which meant that when we came here, we were able to use areas of the building easily without having to make substantial investment in repairs to the structures and fabric of the building.
The plan was to regenerate the site with a dual personality of business park and arts centre. Quite an undertaking, but the owners had an unbeatable natural resource: belief.
They're adaptable spaces because they're large in the main, as you can see here. They're large open areas. You've got very regular floor plates. They've got good floor-to-ceiling heights, good natural daylight. So once you get into the building, the nature of what is here is a very flexible space with which to work. Our starting point was about trying to identify the businesses we believed could come here, would come here, and that was mainly about small or start-up businesses on very flexible terms, with the aspiration of bringing the whole building back into use, and really as a part of that then, starting to have higher and higher aspirations about the quality of that reuse and the way in which we're reusing the building.
When you drive into Halifax, you see Dean Clough. I have visitors come to see me and they're absolutely astounded. There's miles and miles of buildings and they're just doing so much with it.
One of the most popular reuses for industrial spaces like this is as arts centres. The problem is always how to make them pay. At Dean Clough, they seem to have found the answer.
We have a lot of gallery spaces here, and they form part of the package that we provide to our customers as a whole. In terms of what they provide in direct income, then it's relatively minor, but they're nevertheless part of the product that we are selling to our customers.
I think that sort of lends a sort of vitality to the whole of the site, really, and I think people do love that. They come through the galleries to go to their offices and to their places of work. I've heard it said that some really large corporations have come on board because of the galleries, because of the ambience of the galleries. You know, they find it so attractive.
20 years on from the Hall family coup, businesses are queuing up to move in here. Today, 3,500 people work at Dean Clough. That's almost as many as in its Victorian heyday. And it's still growing. Proof, perhaps, that when it comes to restoring a historic building, it pays to think big.
So it's interesting, really, because Dean Clough was a sort of business opportunity to begin with that became a glorious restoration. Now we're going to move on to look at our final place that you can vote for today. Now, I have to say that there is no business opportunity here. In fact, the whole of this place was built as a sort of monument to frivolity.
Meet Thomas Wentworth. It's 1695, and after a meteoric career as a soldier and a politician, Thomas fully expects to inherit the family estate at Wentworth Woodhouse, near Barnsley. Instead, it goes to Thomas Watson Wentworth, his cousin. In a fit of pique, Thomas ran straight off to snap up the neighbouring estate. He had just one intention: to make it bigger and better than his rivals. First, he built a rather blatant Baroque extension. The Watson Wentworths took up the challenge and popped on a new Baroque frontage of their own, with gardens. Thomas laid out his own gardens with the help of one George London, none other than the Royal Gardener. The Watson Wentworths hit back with some cutting-edge Georgian design and splashed the main house with a tasty Palladian front. There followed an obelisk, a terrace, a stable block, a mausoleum, a Corinthian temple, a Doric temple, and a Huber stand, whatever that may be. The family rivalry continued for the next 150 years, during which time they built over 50 structures. This is Wentworth today. The main hall is already well preserved. We've come to see two other buildings on the estate, remaining from that spree. Tonight, you can vote to save two buildings that came about as a result of a family feud. Let's hope there's no fighting as Marianne and Ptolemy investigate the first of them.
Glass house.
Cast iron. So elegant. I mean, just look at those thin glazing bars.
It's a miniature crystal palace, isn't it?
It's a crystal cottage.
This would have been the latest technology of the time, though, wouldn't it?
I can just hear the structural engineer. Oh, you can't possibly design it like that. It won't stand up.
It looks in pretty dire condition, though, doesn't it? Let's go and have a look inside.
Conservatories first became fashionable in the early 19th century. Constructed from glass and wrought and cast iron and heated by hot water pipes, they provided a controlled environment for the cultivation of exotic plant specimens, brought back by explorers from the furthest corners of the empire. Classic examples included the Palm House at Kew and Crystal Palace.
Oh, look at all of this. It's like the forgotten secret garden, isn't it? You know, the end of the 19th century has passed us by and everything has returned to nature.
Look at this.
Heating pipes.
Yeah. I mean, this is high-tech stuff, this is, isn't it? Look at these heating pipes. I suppose it was important to get these glazing bars really thin in order to bring in the maximum light.
It's just unbelievable how fine that is. And all of this kind of cast iron. 19th century, they'd really come on top of making cast iron. You know, it was absolutely the thing. They couldn't stop making enough of it. Everything here is machine made. The tiles, the cast iron. And you can imagine standing on these stone slabs, these beautiful potted camellias and ferns and exotic plants which people were discovering during the 19th century. Look, have you ever seen one of these? It's an azalea. Can you imagine it?
The irrigation system was also ingenious. Rainwater was drained through these hollow cast iron supporting pillars into an underground tank, from where it was recycled. It probably seemed like a good idea at the time, but in the absence of constant maintenance, it's caused serious problems.
This is the most difficult material to repair, isn't it, cast iron? Because quite often, like here, it's broken down, and you've probably actually gone beyond the point of repair there. I would imagine you'd have to replace that whole post.
I think the real difficulty here is really actually a structural one. The way that the building is constructed is that you have essentially 3 parallel roofs. On here, it rests on an incredibly thin cast iron section of what is actually also a gutter. Their ingenuity has really almost cost them the building, because combining the water disposal system with the structure system with then making it out of cast iron means you've got this fatal combination of water, structure and rust. Marion, look at this. Come on, let me take you by the arm and walk you romantically through here, because it's twist and turn through the columns and ferns. You know, it's the most romantic place. This is where the secrets of the estate were told. Did you not think that terrible man was so rude at the dinner table? Oh, absolutely. You know, and this is where the whole sort of nature of country house life took place, strolling through the gardens where you were away from all that formality of Victorian life. You could just have these little moments of privacy.
I've seen so many country estates where the glass house has just been left to rack and ruin, because it's such a problem building, isn't it?
It's amazing, in fact, that this has survived.
The conservatory clearly had a practical use, but the estate's whole raison d'etre was simply Thomas Wentworth's desire to show off. His trump card in this game of architectural one-upmanship was a giant folly called Stainborough Castle. It's a short walk from the conservatory, and it's the second of the 2 buildings that add up to one of your votes at Wentworth.
Look, a wonderful folly of madness. Only England can produce follies of complete madness like this. I mean, imagine bringing the stone up to this absurd construction. Look at it, it's marvellous.
It's great.
This is your ancient Norman castle, which you've conveniently planted here at the end of one of your avenues. It's all about taking the English landscape and turning it into your very own little bit of empire. And what better way to defend your empire than this model fort? That boar-shaped hoop window, quatrefoil window, has no military requirement whatsoever. It's all about...
Hopeless for shooting arrows out of.
Oh, no one was interested in shooting arrows out of those arched windows. It's like a little citadel, isn't it?
What a great thing. Look inside, it's all plastered as well inside. This had a proper roof, didn't it, this little tower?
This is all about pleasure, this estate. This is what England does. It does these beautiful country houses and these country house estates. And there's, no other civilization has produced anything like it. They are absolutely spectacular when they're at their best. And this is one of the best ones, don't you think?
Thomas Wentworth strategically positioned his play castle at the highest point of the estate. In 1727, there were no trees up here, so you could see and be seen for miles, especially from Wentworth Woodhouse. The castle first became unstable as a result of subsidence. Once it fell out of regular use, it went rapidly downhill.
Here in the entrance to the toy fort itself, huge, great baroque curved stone. And you can see here, look at the stone. I mean, have you ever seen such chronic gum disease in your life?
One of the biggest problems in the restoration scheme is going to be dealing with this stone. It's a a local rubble stone, which is actually very poor quality. And we find here in areas like this you've got terrible erosion caused by one of the problems, water percolating down from the wall head because there haven't been any roofs for so long, so all this stone's been left exposed. And you can see down at the bottom here where the problem's really acute. This is just returning to sand. The binder has completely disappeared from the stone and you're just left with the granules of the sandstone.
It wouldn't be financially viable to rebuild a folly like this. Instead, the plan is to make it safe and preserve it as a picturesque ruin.
We've seen two buildings which are about pleasure and fun. And I have to say, I find that the most refreshing thing in the world. I mean, look at it. It's delightful, it's amusing, it's jolly.
It's pure indulgence, isn't
So what? It's like having bubble bath. I say lots of bubble bath. And then we went to that wonderful glass house. That glass house was all about combining technology, the latest 19th century technology, with beauty.
But imagine taking a perambulation around the grounds, if you've never been before, and these incredible vistas leading up into these brilliant buildings that only revealed themselves to you as you got to the top of the path. And what a thing to find. This must have been great.
At the moment, you can only visit Wentworth on a few days a year. But ownership is about to pass from Barnsley Council to a heritage trust, who want to open it all year round. Which would be a good thing, because this amazing collection of buildings should be enjoyed by everyone. So what do they want to do here?
Our project is really to restore the buildings and monuments on the estate, to restore the landscape, mainly to its late 18th century form, to restore the gardens and to give public access.
Right.
That is the fundamental thing.
How much are you looking for then?
The restoration of Stainborough Castle and the Conservatory is part of a £17.5 million project to restore the whole estate.
So what are you asking the view's restoration to support?
We're looking to restoration to provide certainly the £2 million we need to restore the Conservatory and the £500,000 that we need to restore Stainborough Castle. They're two almost unique structures, particularly Stainborough Castle,
right,
which is only one of two of this kind of Gothic folly in the country,
right,
and certainly on this scale. The Victorian Conservatory, all right, it's a much later building, but it is a gem of its type. Both these structures are listed in the English Heritage Register as buildings at risk. And in fact, the Conservatory is listed as the building most at risk in South Yorkshire.
Right.
So it's in dire need of rescuing. It's an unknown estate in what was a heavy industrial area, which is a very deprived area. And I think we need to give the local community, the wider community of South Yorkshire, the opportunity to enjoy the pleasures of these wonderful grounds, gardens, to enjoy their own history and the history of an estate that was part of their community, although they may never have been physically allowed near it.
Or even aware of it.
Or even aware of it.
So there we are, we've got a 2 for the price of 1 offer here. We've got this fantastic, glorious sham castle and that lovely conservatory, all in this splendid setting.
The plan is to make safe Stainborough Castle and turn it into a picnic area and open-air performance space, while the conservatory is to be restored to its full Victorian bloom, all at a cost of £2.5 million. Will you vote for one of the nation's most sublime parkland estates?
So there we are, a difficult choice today, I think. But if you want to vote for Wentworth, this is how you do it.
To see Wentworth Conservatory and Stainborough Castle brought back to life, call the Restoration Vote line on 0901 077 7777 and nominate Wentworth. That's 0901 077 7777.
So there they are, 3 more embattled candidates from the northeast, which all deserve your support, but only one of them can go forward to our final. And to help you make up your mind, here as usual, are 3 people who want to make the case for why their favourite should be yours as well. She's one of our best-known war correspondents who's covered all the major conflicts of recent times. Kate Adie, who hails from nearby Newcastle, is filing her report for Ravensworth Castle.
This country has lots of heaps of old stones, so why have more? Well, this is more than just a heap of stones. Ravensworth's special. It was a medieval castle, then it was a grand 18th century house, then a grand Victorian house, and now, well, a bit of a jungle, but a very special kind of jungle. Huge amount of greenery, 600 acres right on the edge of Tyneside, with council estates and great terraces of houses all round it, but it's right in the middle. It's hidden, it's special, and not only does it have a past, it can have a future, because there's all sorts of plans to redevelop it so that people can come in, use it, work in it, and just appreciate it for what it is. A very special place in the northeast. I'm hugely keen about our roots in the northeast. My roots go right down there, and why shouldn't we actually celebrate our roots and put up branches to the future?
Here's a historian who spends his life travelling the world in search of long-lost civilizations. So it may come as a surprise that he's moved by the human story of the most modern of our buildings, the prisoner of war camp at Harperley.
I can remember when I was about 6, my great-uncle Eddie in my grandfather's house talking about the First World War, you know, and he said, so what are you doing at school, lad? And I said, I'm doing history, Uncle Eddie. And he said, he rolled his trousers up to show shrapnel wounds in his leg, and he pointed down to it and he said, that's history, my lad. I think Harperley Camp is the loveliest and most touching story in the whole restoration project. It's just a bunch of crude concrete huts, but when you walk inside, the past comes alive in the most magical way. The story shows you how former enemies can become friends. Many of the Germans who were prisoners there married local girls and had children, and many of the others bring their own children and their grandchildren back. So this tells you something very important about history. History is really about real lives, the human heart and memory, and living connections with our past. Our past. It's not about them, it's about us. And that's why I'd vote for Harperley Camp.
Next up, a highly popular gardener with a passion for historic buildings and the preservation of Britain's gardens. Rachel de Thame is about to put her head on the block for Wentworth, our own horticultural candidate.
I feel passionately about saving these buildings at Wentworth, not only because I've always been fascinated by old buildings, but because as a gardener they really do speak volumes to me. In this country, more people garden than attend football matches. That's an extraordinary statistic. It really is our national obsession, and these buildings represent particularly what the Victorians did for horticulture. They were obsessive plantsmen. They went out there gathering plants and they brought them back to these temples to horticulture. They're places of fun and enjoyment. They really are important and unique, and we must save them.
Do make that call. Not only does it help the building's chances of making it through to the final, but each call adds to the £3 million set aside for this project by the Heritage Lottery Fund. I'm back on Friday with the result from this programme and 3 more candidates from Wales. Until then, take your chance to make your mark on history. Pick up the phone and vote. Thanks. Good night.
For more information on voting or donating, go to CFAX page 623. Over on BBC 4, staying in the northeast to uncover some more national treasures. Masterpieces of design from the Industrial Revolution to the present. Restoration secrets starting now.
Now listen everybody, I want to tell you a little story. Well listen, you'll find out. It's a tale about the sins of fame. Yeah.
Adultery and corruption.
A story of love that defies all odds.
Hey! Stories about jealousy.
You locked me out, mate.
As well as deception and greed.
I go out walking
Canterbury Tales. 6 stories retold for our times. Starts 11th of September on BBC One.